Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another update on what's happening in the Windsor Essex County real estate market. My name is Arms Bumanlag for Royal LePage Binder Real Estate. And as always, I'm joined by my friend, our broker owner, Frank Binder, who is joining the live stream with us today. Frank, good to see you, my friend. And thanks for
Good to see
making some
you.
time with me today.
Yeah, good to see you again, Arms. Always great to spend some time with you. Absolutely.
And we've got lots to unwrap too from the month of February. Here we are 2 months into 2022. And, we usually kick things off with a wide look at what's happening right across Windsor Essex. And I know we really want to compartmentalize sort of the thinking of the region as a whole, but to really look at specific municipalities and different regions
Yeah,
too. I think there's some
yeah,
interesting facts to take a look at this particular snapshot, Frank.
yeah. And whatever, why we're bringing that up? I mean, this is just basically showing you a snapshot of really the most important salient points that we will raise in our discussion today. But if you look at the bottom right hand corner where it says area, and it basically tells you the communities that we service, right? And then you'll look at the average sale price. You'll see that there's a difference in average sales price by community compared to the average that is posted up at the top, which is $677,270. That component is an aggregate of all the sales in Windsor and Essex County, and you get an average. You can see that we had a 36.9% increase year to date over last year. And we'll get to that shortly. But what I really want you to see is that if you look at Amherstburg, for example, the Amherstburg price as an aggregate is 711,523 with a 38% increase. So what you're seeing is that there's a localization of real estate in various different communities as well. And these numbers are not quite exactly the same as you'll see the average there. So if I'm looking at Kingsville, for example, I'm going to be able to find a house for slightly less money. And obviously, Wheatley, which is one of the lowest ones in Leamington, that's a totally different market altogether. And you've got a $509,000 average there, with Leamington with a substantial increase, and Wheatley ever so slight increase. So we have to understand what we're trying to get across is that there is really a difference or a dichotomy in various different locations, and particularly if you're moving from one location to another within Windsor and Essex County, there will be some differences there. So you pay attention to that, and that's why that particular area is shown that way, because we want to show you that there are certainly differences in prices in each location.
It's almost like these municipalities really, I mean, they are their own separate areas, but it's really getting out of that mindset that, when you see that average sale price, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
depends really where you are at in
yeah,
the region as a whole. Like it's
yeah,
very different.
yeah. And it is, and it's also different by house type. And I'm talking to my group, and we're going to be coming forward with some of that averages as well as to what the house type is. So if you're looking for a two-story versus a ranch versus a raised ranch versus those have its own price value. So we have a lot of statistics that we can break down in many, many different ways, and that's just one of them. But the interesting thing is, the first thing we wanted to draw your attention to is that there is a difference in area, and that's exactly what that particular snapshot shows, is that depending on what every area is, pay attention to the area that you're in, and if you're trying to get a sense of what you could get for your house, you want to pay attention to that particularly, not necessarily to the average that is, overall. Okay.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about, Frank, too, is taking a look at that median price, right? That's
Yeah.
something that continues to
Yeah.
move here, and it's a bit of a move, at
Yeah.
least $50,000 worth, right?
Yeah. Well, it's actually more than that. Okay, the median price is actually $630,000 right now, and it's hard to explain to you what a median price is. I'm not going to spend a lot of time at that. But what I've done just for our presentations here. You remember I used to have it under $500,000, over $500,000, and I've
Yes.
kind of moved that up because the median price has moved into the sixes already. So we have to keep moving that median price up, and so we moved it up to 550. It's very arbitrary, just to give you a sense of what's trading over or under a number. But I could tell you that if we had kept it at 500, these numbers, the 224 would even be less, and the over 500 would be even more, right? If it would have been well over 375. But even at this point in time, it's important for you to realize that these are the houses that have sold under that 550, and these are the houses that have sold over the 550, and still the upper market is 62% of the sales. So the upper market is getting stronger, and the lower market is getting less. So I can tell you in the area of, up to about 150, you probably got only two houses that have sold, right? And the
Mhm.
rest of those houses are above that. So we're not seeing anything in that low levels anymore, hardly ever at all. And they're not getting a lot of activity there. So what you might end up doing, we could really take 100 up to the 150 mark and eliminate it altogether and start the graph at really almost 100, 150 to 200,000, and that's kind of where it starts because you're just not getting sales at those levels anymore. Because of everything's trading in the upper range. So, and I want to also point out in the upper range too, one of the things that happened this last month in February is that we usually talk about what particular area got the most sales. Was it the one from 500 to 550, 549 to 500? Well, this year it was this month rather it was 700 to 749. That had 60 houses that sold in the month of February, which we never see the upper ranges leading the pack. Usually it's really in the middle of the pack where that always stays. But what did we see in February? We saw that the upper range sold the most houses. So this kind of interesting phenomenon that we saw happening in February, and there's going to be more to that too. It's also another thing is that the houses over a million. We had 65 houses sell over a million, and last month 35 houses. So we had 30 more houses sell over a million in that market. So that upper market really affected the price. And why did we see that 36% increase? Because most of the trading was in the upper range. And when you see trading in the upper range, it's going to pull up that average to an even higher degree. And that's important for us to understand what's going on and what was happening in the month of February.
It's an increase in listings, right? Which is
Yeah,
so unusual, I guess, in a lot of different
yeah,
markets.
yeah. Listings go up. The listings have been very, very good. And when I say that, we're seeing increases, and we did see an increase again in February. If we bring up that next graph, it'll show you what our listings are. We started the month with 300 and some odd listings, and we ended the month with over 300 listings in the inventory. So that's a good thing. That means that we've got not an abundance, but we've got enough listings. Yeah, I talked to my colleagues across the province, and then they have very few listings. We have major cities with 100 listings, and we're sitting here with 300. So we've got stuff to pick from. Let's understand something. The reason why people could buy houses over $1 million and 65 could be sold is because we had them. They were on the market, and so that's a good thing. We don't normally see that. We see a lot of houses moving out of the market at the time in the winter months, but that's not been the case now. And we've got a good supply. I'm not saying a great supply, but a good supply of properties for people to see. And even though you're getting, even if you have multiple offers on these properties, that just means that demand is overwhelming even then what the number of properties that are available. The key for us to understand during this season is that very often what's happening too is I may not have any competition in my neighborhood. If I'm the only house that sells in my neighborhood, I will get the increased price because I've still got lots of demand looking for houses. The same demand that was there prior to the winter months is still there, and people are still looking for it. So if you're the only house up for sale, you'll probably get a better price, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
Frank, just before we get to the average sale price here, we've got a comment from our good friend Beth here watching the live stream. She goes, Frank, do you think that with more people listing their homes this spring, hoping to quote unquote win the lottery, will that somewhat stabilize prices with more selection for buyers?
That's a hard one because I don't think that's going to happen necessarily. What we have is we have a lot of people who are listing their houses right now because they want to cash out. They realize that with the interest rate going higher at this point in time, it may have a downward trend on prices. And I think that's what Beth is kind of indicating is that
Mm-hmm.
will there be that downward trend? Yes. And that's why people are kind of rushing the market. We saw that trend when even when the government announced that there were going to be higher interest rates. What did we see? We saw buyers rushing to the market, trying to buy houses to get into their houses before that happened. Now what we're seeing is that as the interest rates do go up, we're seeing sellers putting their houses on the market, trying to beat the fact that there might be some drag on the price of their houses, and that drag would be a downward drag. And it's not going to happen right away with the first increase in interest rates, but it may occur in subsequent raises. And we're now being told that we could expect anywhere up to four raises of interest during the price.
Wow.
And as we get this inflationary thing going on that we've got going on, that doesn't bode well for it. We will likely there will be attempts to slow it down by interest rates, and that's likely that's what they use to slow it down. And so we could expect that probably we're going to see at least a couple interest rate increases over the next several months. That's my take on it.
I think that's a great take to look at too, right? Is seeing what's down the road in the next
Right.
little bit with everything going on in the world and certainly in our country as well.
Yeah.
Our average sale price, Frank, to take a look at this, continues to be kind of interesting here too. You take a look at the increase in listings, and we'll get to the average sales price in just a second here, but the increase in listings, we kind of touch base on that. Interesting to see too.
Yeah, I mean, and if anything's a good story, the good story is that product has come on the market for us here in our location. It seems to be feeding, some of the demand, not all of the demand, but it's meeting a lot of it, and that's really, really important for us to have that. What happens is that if we didn't have that, we'd have even higher price increases, which is, for us to get our minds around a 36% increase. That's difficult enough. Could you imagine if we just didn't have this? If we didn't have the supply of properties, and it was a very moderate supply. Most areas in the country are not seeing listings that are being increased. We had a 9% increase in the month of February. So, I mean, those are the types of things that are happening, and they're good things. Those are all good things for us to keep that a level playing field, as much of the level playing field that we can get. We can't ask for much more if the listings are there and the product's there. We had an increase of sales, we had an increase of listings, but the listings were higher than the sales, so that's a good thing. So that means that we ended the month too with still some supply going into the next month. And as we get into March and April, and those are higher listing months, and more listings will come on the market. Hopefully that'll satisfy buyers who are not being able to get houses right now. Okay.
And then there are average sale price too. I mean, you're looking at January to February. There's a bit of an uptick there too, Frank.
Yeah. And why did we put this just from January to February? We're not looking at last year. Last year we had increases last year substantially. So what's the difference between the month of January and February? That's a substantial difference. That's quite a climb in 1 month. It's well over 6 or 7%. And when you see that kind of climb in just 1 month, what happened? Well, the answer to that is that we just talked about, is that there was an awful lot of activity in the upper price range. So if the upper price range is what's selling the most you're selling the most houses in the upper price range, you're going to pull that price up. And that's exactly what happened. We had substantial amount of activity in the higher ranges than we did in the lower ranges. So the bottom line is that people took advantage of it and got out there and bought those houses, and that's it. That's exactly what we're seeing. We saw a higher average price in the month of February over January of just a month ago. Whether it will stay there will be another question. So what we may see that number having risen to that level, and then we might see it gradually either slightly drop, or we might see an ebb of at least it might plateau out at that point in time, depending on what the supply side now brings to the market in the next several different months. So it's not uncommon at the beginning of the year for prices to spike up and then to kind of even out over the rest of the spring market, because as I said, supply will kind of bring that back to some degree.
And just before we get into sort of a unique look for this particular market update, I know you wanted to take a look at the Canadian market as a whole and kind of talk a little bit about what's not necessarily just happening right here in our own backyard, but what's really happening right across our country in terms of the real estate market over the last the month or so, right, Frank?
Yeah, and we've been talking about supply, and I've been talking about supply a lot. Because that's really a big thing in the country. The country's talking about supply, the lack of housing supply everywhere that we are. I mean, every big region is facing that reality. And if you look at the Canadian stats of having 33% 1 year over year, it's down 33%. So most areas are faced with that reality where supply has been down by 33%. That's not us. That's not us. We are bucking that trend, and we're actually going up in listings and having more listings available to us. So I can't imagine where we'd be if we were faced with that same reality of 33%. So that's one major difference between us and the rest of the country, or the national average, if you want to call it that. And the other thing is that the market's still tight. The market's tight across the entire country. I don't care what region you're in, the market is tight. And the reason for it is because you don't have supply. Market's always going to be tight. I can't trade houses if I don't have them to trade. And that's one of the things. So it's then what comes into play in those particular situations is the building. So is building can it make up that difference? Most cases it can't, because you just can't ramp it up fast enough. And that's exactly what happens. So if there's all that approval process, everything else, building permits, it just takes time. So the thing is that isn't really helping out. So most markets across the country were really, really tight. Let's look at what the historic high for the Canadian real estate market was. 199 was the aggregate amount of all these markets, and we're not there. We're not at 726. We're still under the national average. So can you imagine what the average is across the country? And that's the average across the country. So we're still not there. And when I say that average, that was for the end of December. It could even be up higher than that right at the moment. I don't have the latest average, but that was at the end of December. So we're seeing record sales in all of Canada. Was 667,000 sales of homes in the last year, which is a record amount. We're just seeing that happen. That activity across the country is exactly, we're just showing that same thing here, that we're reaching record levels and record amounts. Unit sales for us were slightly above, not a whole lot above. So, and other places have been, but it has a record in the entire country. So that's what you're seeing, and that's really, really interesting. But this is not something that we don't know. These are the things that are happening across the country. We're mirroring some of it, but not all of it, and that's important for those folks that are selling their homes in Windsor, Essex, to know.
Some great insight and some great outlook, I guess, from right across the country to give it sort of that comparable look to what's happening right here in Windsor and Essex County too. And some new graphs for our market update too, Frank, to take a look at. So this is interesting. This is from Korea. This is a listing trend line. When you compare, I guess, 2020 to 2021, right?
Right. And and it's exactly that. That's what's going in the country. We're not following that trend line. We didn't see listings drop by 24% at all. If anything, they've increased in the last year. So thankfully we bucked that trend line. I wanted to show that only to bring it like a show and tell type of process, see what's happening in the rest of the country compared to us. And we actually should appreciate the fact that we've got the listings to sell. Frankly, that's been a good story for all of 2021. So, I mean, that shows it right there in a nutshell.
I think that's a good outlook to take a look at. And then, people looking at homes over the next little bit. This is great to see because, it really, I think, slices the pie, so to speak, of, people who are just maybe kicking the tires, so to speak, versus looking to plant some roots.
Yeah, and this comes right from Realtor.ca that people are looking at. These graphs are coming right from that. That's basically a hugely important one. If you look at that, getting started, if you add the two together, you've got 63%. That's the substantial amount of people that are looking at it. And the 2% is just purchased. But the bottom line is that you've got a lot of people that are really in the market. They're looking for homes. There's no question about it. There's another, there's a graph. I don't think we've got it, but the other graph too is there was about 56% of the people who would have bought a house who sat out during the pandemic. So if those people would have been in the market, I can't imagine where we'd be. So we're fortunate we had some people sitting out during the pandemic that didn't buy a house, decided, we're going to sit out for a while because the pandemic's is throwing things into some chaos, and we've experienced some of it for sure. But that's exactly what's happened. We've had people sitting out, not sitting on the sidelines, deciding, hey, I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to do anything during the pandemic. And in a way, I guess we can, as realtors, can be thankful that some of them did sit out, because I don't know where the market would have gone if they hadn't. Really, quite frankly, we'd even be in more serious straits in terms of what the pricing would have been, and so on and so forth. But all that is showing you is that there is tremendous amount of demand still. It's still there. It still can happen. And you know what, we can get into a whole lot of discussion as to why. A lot of it is migration. We still have met migration for people moving from the large centers to Toronto and down to us, retirement. We have to remember that the baby boomers are retiring. And when they are retiring, they can make a decision to live wherever they want to. So how long will that go on? Well, let's how many baby boomers are retiring every year? Substantial amounts, and they'll make a decision as to whether they're going to stay where they are, or they'll go to another community, or they'll downsize. And what does downsizing mean? Downsizing doesn't mean a smaller house. It can mean a different community, and that's exactly right. We're very mobile now, and my kids are in another location. I'm going to move my kids. So these are the types of things that are happening in our business, and will continue to happen, because those are the trends, and they're not going to just go away. Some will, because if it's just an employment situation, then those will be made and that'll be done. But eventually, what happens? You're still going to have lots of people who are retiring, who will be moving to different centers. That's going to keep happening. Also, what will happen is immigration. So if we start ratcheting up the numbers, we're talking about bringing Ukrainians into the country. We're talking about bringing others into the country. Well, you know what? Ultimately, they have to be housed, and they have to find places. So at the end of the day, we will still be a market for immigration, for sure, and migration. And so will smaller towns of Chatham and Sarnia. They're now the sweet spots for a lot of people to come down to southwestern Ontario. And we're going to continue to see that for the foreseeable future.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for your insight as always. It's a pleasure to talk to you and sort of break down those numbers and give people a sense of what's happening here in Windsor Essex. And, with our 5 locations right across Windsor Essex, if anyone's ready to make a move or put their home on the market, they can check out RoyalLePageBinder.com. Frank, a pleasure as always, my friend.
Thanks for the plug. Appreciate it. All right.
Anytime. Thank you, Frank.
All right.
Frank Binder, who is our broker of record and owner of Royal LePage Binder Real Estate. Great guy, and really happy to break down some of those numbers from February 2022 in the region. So again, check out the website, RoyalLePageBinder.com. And thank you so much for spending some time with us here on our Royal LePage Binder Live Market Update. Thanks for watching.